is the Yamaha. Yamaha makes really high quality audio systems, and this is going to be looking at why this is a good one, what's important and what's not. Now, you thought they made motorbikes, so do I, but they also make, and this is an integrated amplifier. It's the A-S2200. And I've looked at this. As at the date of this video, you can see it's available at £2,895. Let's see what you get for your money. Good one. I can just scroll down here. Got the total harmonic distortion for the output power. This one's quite interesting. This is the bit that makes it look weird. Because you've got 0.02 as being the center point there. And then as you're driving it at 20 kilohertz, you get up to, it's virtually flat until you get to about 50, 60, 70 watts. Then at 70 watts it starts to rise, 80 watts, 90 watts. It's at 0.02, well, 0.03 I think. And then, boom, it goes skyward. Now that's due to the fact that you're running out of power. You're running out of drive. Now, if you look at this, this is tone control characteristics, which means when you turn the knobs, you boost the frequencies in that pattern, which is quite nice. It's what you'd expect. Right, now looking at this, this is quite good. This is the actual specifications. It weighs 22.7 kilograms. That's heavy. And it says here the maximum power consumption is 700 watts for Taiwan. Now, one of the things that a lot of these companies do is they change what they do for the different countries just a bit, just to get around some regulations. Sometimes it's tax, duty, sometimes it's safety, sometimes it's just so it's not the same as a competitor in that particular market. So here we go. We got your AC volts for USA and Canada, 120 volts 60 hertz. China 220, blah blah blah. UK 230, Asia 220, Taiwan 110. All it's 60 hertz, 50 hertz. It makes a real difference. Power consumption model for Asia 250 watts. Other models 350 watts. So that would give you an idea of what it's actually expecting to be doing. And in standby mode, it's just 0.2 watt. And that's quite a low figure, really. I mean, you don't have to worry, we're not going to run too many power stations by leaving it in standby. But if you've bought one of these amplifiers, it's just nice to know. It's good. It's got moving coil and moving magnet inputs. It's got the CD. And it's using the balanced inputs. 74 dB. Pretty damn good. I would have one of these if I had the money. Don't get me wrong. Rated output power of 20 Hz to 20 kHz, that means within the audible range of your ears. If you're a 5-year-old. If you're my age, it stops at about 10k, so don't worry about it. There we go, 0.7% total harmonic distortion. That's the distortion that is caused by the sagging of the drive. 2 channels driven, that means what you can expect with it being turned up properly. 8 ohms, 90 watts and 90 watts for Asia. 6 ohms, 110 watts, 110 watts, which is pretty damn good. Other models, 90 and 90, 150, 150 for 4 ohms. So the lower the ohms, the higher the current, the higher the wattage. Then you look at dynamic power. Now this is where people start getting confused, because this is a reputable company and it's a good piece of kit. It does give you a little bit of a handling of surges. So 105 and 105, compare that to 90. So what it's saying is, if you've got a peak coming in, it smacks in, boom, there you go, 105 watts for a short time. Now if you look at here, it says IEC output power, 1 kilohertz, 0.7% total harmonic distortion, no, 0.07% total harmonic distortion. Model for UK and Europe, 95 watts plus 95 watts, so that's at 8 ohms, that's going to give you quite a good response. Maximum effective power output. Again, this is, if you really squirt it up, you see 10% total harmonic distortion. You've got to compare that to 0.07% total harmonic distortion before, which means when it's starting to make funny noises and the speakers are rattling a bit, you're doing 120 watts. That's a lot of power, and I wouldn't do that. Just to put it in context, this is the figures for a cheap amplifier, the sort of you buy to put in a room, and as you can see here, it's at 0.4%, and that's when they consider it good. And that's at half rated output, so this Yamaha is superb. But it does prove, because this is a piece of kit that's well made, that you can actually do it to an extent and get a reputable result from it. Power bandwidth, 0.1% total harmonic distortion, 45 watts, 2 channels driven, 10 Hz to 50 kHz into 8 ohms. That's saying it goes from very low to the sort of highs that, well, you're not going to hear it, but the bats outside might be. Damping factor, we won't worry about that. That's 250 or higher, that's a good number. That's the ability to control the speaker when it's going in and out. The sensitivities we won't worry about. Signal noise ratio on the MMC, 90 dB, MM, 96 dB, CD, 110 dB, and balanced input, 114 dB. That actually is referring to the difference between the hiss, that is very quiet, and the ability to drive hard. 90 dB is pretty damn good. 110 dB. If you can just hear the hiss, when you hear the loudest sound a CD can make, it will make your ears bleed, or thereabouts. 110 dB is past the threshold of pain, so it will hurt. Your eyes will water. Total harmonic distortion plus noise, we'll ignore that. It's all so small, it doesn't matter. Deviations from RIAA equalizers. Now, people get funny about this, but this is the ability to follow the magnetic cartridge and the movement coil cartridge to be the correct frequency response. Plus or minus 0.5 dB, which means plus or minus hardly anything. Frequency response. Now, this one's quite interesting. It says 5 Hz to 100 kHz, plus 0, minus 3 dB. That means it goes from a very low, extremely low, to twice what the other number was, which means even smaller bats are hearing this one, and minus 3 dB. That's a very, very small amount. 6 dB means half or double what you started with. So 3 dB is half of that. So it's a very small deviation. You would not really notice that. So if you could hear 100 kHz, you'd be happy. Maximum input signals, CD, or similar, 2.8 volts RMS. So that's your normal line input type levels. When it says maximum, what it means is when it's putting out the full sound that it could possibly do, it will be swinging 2.8 volts RMS. Ordinarily, it wouldn't be anywhere near that because it would be just playing gentle music at you, sweetly. That is the specifications. One thing I did think was interesting on here, because this is a modern amplifier, it's specified in 2020, and it's an audiophile amplifier, so you've got these strange connections on it, which are called balanced inputs, as well as RCAs, or as we call them in the UK, phonos, we used to in the old days. It's got some interesting things. It has, unusual for a modern amplifier, it's got inputs for all the different signals you might want to put in there. It says on here, tuner, CD player or network player, CD player featuring RCA jacks. It's also got on here BD player, etc. So that'd be playing your BD, Blu-ray disc players into there. Now it's got the turntable input. That one has got a proper turntable input. Then that matches why we got the RIAA curve things, but it's worth noting you don't have to buy a preamp, a phono preamp if you buy this amplifier. You got speaker terminals are out on there. Then you scroll down on here, and it says external active subwoofer, which is fine. You can feed that. Got your other speakers. There you go. This one, CD recorder, tape deck, etc. Line input 2 on this amplifier has got inputs and outputs, and that's where you'd plug in your cassette deck or your reel-to-reel deck, or as it suggests here, CD recorder. It has signals in and signals out, and they're not modified by the tone controls, so they are pure signals. Thought that was of use. Looking at the back of this, you can see there's a lot of attention to detail. It looks gorgeous, and the connectors are amazingly good quality. I wish I had the money to buy one of these, but then I'd have to buy the speakers as well. And then it's one of those things that you just end up wanting more and more and more. But it would be lovely. Anyway, it goes through some specs on the front on the features. It says floating balance circuit for power amplifier, fully balanced transmission from input to output, tone control circuit with a parallel volume system, large power supply with 4 separate circuits, left and right symmetrical design, fully discrete phono amp. That's the bit for plugging your turntable in. Low impedance, high performance headphone amp, which means it's a proper headphone amp rather than just something that's just going to be whacked on. It's not like the one on your phone. We're back to the front page now. Well, there we go. That's quite interesting. Very nice piece of kit. So, like, subscribe, and try and get some more of these videos out to you. There's some good videos coming up on here. Have a quick look.